It's always a good idea to be concerned about our democracy while this demagogue is in power, but even more so lately. Have you noticed, like I've noticed, that Trudeau is talking about the destruction of democracy in excess? The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
But we also have to reflect on the fact that we are in extraordinarily challenging times, not just here in Canada, but all around the world, where inflation, where climate change, where the after effects still of the pandemic, where geopolitical destabilization, whether it's wars and conflicts around the world, let's be honest, are throwing everyone for a little bit of a loop.
Let's be more accurate. Governments are throwing people for a loop, and even that is inappropriate to say. What's proper instead is to say governments are crushing people. At the foundation, of course, of this problem is sin. Sin is the start of all of it. And this man and other Western leaders who love to promote progressivism, like him, are perhaps among the most perfect of public representations of what sin desires and what sin looks like. It's wrong. It's evil. It's unjust. It cares nothing for the rights or the freedoms or the inherent dignities of man. There he is. There he is. Take, for example, inflation. He talks about inflation. Who does inflation start and stop with? Does it start and stop with you? Are you the cause of inflation? Are your neighbors the cause of inflation? Is your family the cause of inflation? Your business? Of course not. Absolutely not. Government or inflation starts and stops with government. Government prints more money, more money, more money again and again and again into the billions, the hundreds of billions, the trillions of dollars. There we have inflation. It's an increase in the supply of money, full stop. So whose fault is that? Can a businessman print money? Can you print money? Can I print money? None of us can print money. Who can print money? There he is. There he is once again. So, inflation then is not your fault. It's not the world's fault. It's a government's fault. The same is true of, for example, the lockdowns. Who exactly locked us down? Was it some abstract force? Of course not. Was it, again, your neighbors locking you down? Absolutely not. It was government locking you down, freezing your bank accounts, making sure you weren't able to travel where you wanted to travel, crushing business, closing business, and sinking men into a deep and dark depression as a consequence of their policies over these last years. You see, Trudeau is an expert at deflecting when policies cause the harm of men. Here we have a liberal government who has imposed upon us all of these ridiculous incentives, these ridiculous programs, policies, as I mentioned, that caused and continue to cause serious suffering. And so Trudeau says, well, it's just the way the world is right now. There are all of these problems in the world. It's amazing. Trudeau is the leader of this country, but when anything bad happens, it's not his fault. He has no control over it, and neither does his government or his caucus. But when something good happens in the country, inevitably it comes back to the glorious government of Trudeau. What a strange paradox. A strange and, for that matter, irrational paradox.
And right now, we're seeing, because of all the pressures everyone is under, a challenge to our democracies, a backsliding of democracies in every corner of the world as people are exploiting fear and anger and extreme nationalism and populism to distract from the solutions we need to put forward to very, very real problems we're facing.
Did you hear that? You are the cause of the backsliding of democracy. Trudeau says democracy is backsliding. Democracy is in danger. Democracy is being torn apart, and you're the cause of it. It's your fault. It's your fault for supporting certain politicians. It's your fault for loving your country. It's your fault for doing anything which rational and ordinary man or men love to do. All of it is your fault. It's your fault. It's not, the fault of governments. It's not the fault of those governments that would, again, lock down individuals, not allow them to travel, freeze their bank accounts. It's not their fault. It's not their fault throwing innocent individuals into jail. No, not government's fault. They're not the fault of, or they're not the problem when it comes to this disintegration of democracy. No, it's your fault because you would dare appeal or propose a new politician for the country, one who at least publicly, or others who at least publicly, claim to love the nation. Heaven forbid you commit the prime sin of politics and not support this liberal apparatus.
And I can't be with the Hellenic community without reflecting on the fact that you know well, more than just about anyone else, having been the birthplace of democracy, that democracy didn't happen by accident. It doesn't continue without effort. And that effort is one that each and every one of us need to make as active, engaged citizens, taking an interest in what's happening in our communities, what's an interest in happening, what's happening in our country, and indeed around the world.
So as a matter of fact, in a stroke of irony, Trudeau here is correct. Democracy does not continue. It does not survive if we're apathetic. If we as individuals are apathetic, democracy cannot thrive. It will not thrive. It will not survive if we're absent in the political process. The last thing Trudeau wants is an active population. The last thing he wants, even though he says publicly precisely the opposite, because again, he's a good politician, is for individuals to become involved in the political process and hold him and his government to account. That's exactly what Trudeau doesn't want. He would prefer that every man simply sit at home or work the jobs that they have, and that's all, and not involve themselves with public matters in any sort of way. Why? Because then, of course, it allows Trudeau to do whatever he wants. It allows Trudeau to engage in whatever action he wants, no matter how hideously unjust or corrupt it might be, without worry that men are scrutinizing what he does and are therefore threatening his power. That, of course, means it's exactly what we should do. We have to be actively involved in politics. If we're not, the situation is only going to become so much worse.
And I know with the conversations that have been had about how the Hellenic community is so proud of its heritage, and Prime Minister Mitsotakis will be encouraging you to engage as well in the politics back home. And I think it's a good idea, because how we all step up to actively be part of making those tough decisions that build a better world is, quite frankly, what this community has been able to do for decades here in Canada, and making sure that your voice is resonating around the world, bringing more of these Greek values, more of these Canadian values to bear on the solutions the world is facing, leaves me very, very optimistic for the future. So it is an incredible pleasure for me to be able to be here with you all tonight, and mostly to welcome my good friend, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Prime Minister of Greece. Zito Yalalas, Zito Kalalas.
Right. So his entire speech was a joke. He would dare say he's defending democracy. What is he talking about? Trudeau is the oppressor of democracy. Trudeau is the oppressor of freedom. Again, as I mentioned at the start, all of this stems from sin. Sin is the foundation of man's problem. And Trudeau, in his rule, manifests that sin. And he does so to a larger degree than other men do, because he's shielded, at least in some capacity, from the law. He seems to exercise a hideously perverted immunity from the law, enabling him to engage in all sorts of corruption without ever having to worry about being taken to prison because of it, even though any other man in the nation who would dare engage in such crimes would be in jail so fast they wouldn't even have time to blink. This is the government we live under. This is unsurprising when we look at the whole of human history. It is not shocking to be ruled by a government that's corrupt. The opposite is true. The opposite is true. It is shocking to be ruled by a government that does care about law, that is concerned with justice, that is concerned with freedom. That's a rare government, and it's one that we absolutely have to pursue at all cost.